Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge, the Force of Will Ruler School podcast featuring Ryan Miles.
Hey.
Brandan Bremont.
Hello.
And Frank Closser.
Yeah.
We are going to be talking about serious topics, silly topics, and all things Force of Will. So we're glad to have you guys join us for this first episode. So just real quick, why don't we go ahead and go around the room and give us a little bit about ourselves. Ryan, we'll start with you.
Oh boy, I play Force of Will. I'm the second best player in my entire family. Probably third best player in the world. Really got the good credentials there, you know. And I've won a couple Grand Prix. I make a daily video talking about Force of Will on the Untitled Gaming channel, which is the team that I made / play for. And I'm actually secretly very bad at Force of Will.
And Brandan?
I am the first best player in my family, although my brother has a paid and I don't, so I guess that's kind of up in the air at this point. I play on Outer World Gaming. I think I'm the American with the most tops this season right now. Correct me if that's wrong. At
yeah, 3?
3 right now, yeah. I think that's
sounds correct.
The most of anyone right now, but hopefully getting another one next weekend, so we'll see.
And Frank.
I'm Frank Closser. I'm the only Force of Will player in my family, and I'm the self-proclaimed king of casuals for Force of Will.
That's probably the truth.
I play with Team R&D, which is a team that's all about just crazy brews and stuff. But I also do a fair bit of judging, including head judging a couple times this season. And I also have a paid, so try and be less casual, Brandon.
I know.
Yeah,
Am I the only one of us three that doesn't, besides Jeremy?
I believe so, yeah.
Incredible. All right. Ask me next weekend.
Cheese it in the Wanderer format.
I know.
Yeah, we'll ask you next week how that came up. So, and for those of you who don't know, I am Jeremy Franklin, aka DM073. I wear silly gloves, I run this YouTube channel, and I do a lot of Force of Will content. So, to start things off as a little bit of a fun topic, with the whole idea being the Ruler School and being in the Teacher's Lounge, if you were to be a professor here at the Real School, what class do you think you would teach related to Force of Will?
Are you going to give us an order to go in?
You can. Anybody can jump in.
Yeah, Brandon, anyone can jump in.
All right. I'll jump in first. I think I would definitely teach stats. Stats was my minor in college, and I think it's a large part of how I approach the game. I love hypergeometric calculation. I enjoy talking about card distribution and sort of playing to your outs, which is a lot of thinking about what's left in your deck and what your odds of drawing those certain cards are. I think I approach the game from a pretty mathematical standpoint, so I think that's definitely where I'd be.
Yeah, okay, sweet. The math brain.
I would, despite having majored in mathematics, I think Brandon's actually got me beat on caring about that part as much. I would probably be the deck building teacher. I have a lot of fun making not only competitive decks, because I am first and foremost a very competitive player, but I always try and do so in such a style that is really scanning through the database at 3 a.m. just looking at every single card that could possibly fit into the deck that I'm trying to build. I think that a lot of players, just have a net decking go-to because they don't really know how to build decks. So that would be something that I'd be interested in just helping people with and being all right, if you got a strategy, you got to know what cards you actually need to play and what cards you just got to stop thinking about because they're just for fun and not for actual good games.
Fair enough. Frank?
I would probably be in a similar vein of courses to Ryan, but specifically I would probably be in courses on taking your deck ideas from 0% to about 80%. I have a the last 20% requires a whole lot of practice and dedication to a single deck, and I have a bad tendency of jumping around. So I've gotten very good at taking an idea or a few things and jumping to a competent 80% deck, which leaves you with a lot of X and 3s and X2 1s.
There you go.
Fair enough. Yeah. And if I was to be a professor of something to teach, I think I would, obviously pretty obvious, I guess, I would teach content production in talking about what does it mean to show your love of Force of Will to the world, how do you do video editing, what kind of veins you want to do, and that kind of piece. I think it's something that is important in a card game, and I think we're still early enough in Force of Will's history that there is room to find a space in that world, right? So with other card games that are pretty well established, it's like trying to jump into a massive horde of people just to try to get noticed, and you pretty much drown most of the time from what I've seen. But I think that Force of Will is still in a place where people can take the knowledge and take the fun they have and turn it into content for other people to enjoy. So I think I would work on how to help people do that.
And you certainly do a good job at it too.
Let me know when the first day of classes is. All right, I'm looking to learn.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So, real quick, so you guys are all three on pretty much at this point the most established and kind of well-known United States teams, right? So Force of Will teams have been kind of in and out over the past few seasons, and many of you have played on multiple teams or similar teams or created your own teams. So this is just a topic that I had to talk about. What do you guys see as the benefit or kind of meaning behind forming a team in a competitive card game environment like Force of Will?
So before answering that, I just want to abstractly point out that Ryan started on Outer World and is now on Untitled, and I started on Untitled and I'm now on Outer World. So
I was going to bring that up too.
Funny observation. But to answer the question about why teams are valuable, definitely the biggest value is in playtesting to me, or at least discussing the decks, because you definitely we just don't have the sample size to get a real or we cannot play enough games to get a good sample size for whether or not a deck really works by yourself or with two people. But when you start having like 6 or 7 people that are just playing a bunch of games, you can get a lot more input about what's working and what's not working, and that's definitely the biggest portion of it. And then also just having more ears to like listen in on the community and see what everyone else is trying, and it's sort of it delineates your ability to get data to really start to grind out what the meta looks like and what decks are coming together and which ones aren't.
For me personally, I'm always looking for like different ideas. One thing that like I know is a flaw in my own like deck building or playtesting is I kind of like tunnel like too far into the meta, where I'll get to a point where I'm like, okay, this is really good, so that means that everyone's going to realize this is good, and then they're going to play this, so we need to anti-meta like 2 levels deep, and like sometimes you just get too deep. So it's really good to have other players who are like at different levels of that and are able to like tone you down or like bring you up and just like level each other out. So like a lot of other teams have always made fun of like some of our weaker players. Like Driz has been on Tilt since its inception, and I'm not like trying to call him out, but like this is his first TCG, right? Like he's no, but it's his first TCG. Like he's not experienced in like the deck building aspects. Like he doesn't really know how to deck build because like he literally started playing card games 2 years ago, where most people have been playing card games for 10 years. But anytime I'm like throwing ideas out, like Driz will still like banter back and forth with me and with the rest of the team to like I can always get into like different mindsets of people, because when I can see like the format through his eyes, it helps me deck build and helps me like figure out what I think other people might play. So just like different perspectives, I think having a 7 or 8 people that just see the game differently is super, super important.
You heard it here first, folks. Ryan keeps Driz on the team so he can get the shitter's perspective about what's good.
That's not it. Different perspectives. Like when we had Steph on Tilt Gaming, like she had the fucking she had the absolutely wildest ideas half the time, and like she
has not de-wilded, by the way.
Yeah, no, we'll go in like hour-long conversations at 2 a.m. about like decks that are never going to exist ever, but like you still get to like think about cards in different ways, and like is this card actually playable, or is this just a Steph idea? Like you have to like tone that back sometimes. But like different perspectives, I think, is very, very important, because it stops you from like tunneling on a format.
On my end, in addition to like the testing really helps me, because like between my own like varied playing and stuff, I generally don't have enough practice in at the most like central, like I guess the best lines of play. And so like when you reach a scenario where like you have multiple lines of play and you need to see some odd ones, I can generally see plenty of those, but like consistently like doing the most accurate one is something I have to practice to get, and the team helps there. And the other thing that helps me is just greed checks. Brandon can attest, because I occasionally still ping him all the time, that I'm just like, I'll be like midnight and be like, Brandon, what about this idea? It's amazing, right? And then I like, please tell me I'm not just being greedy.
Gotta scroll through our chats now and see what the last one was. These are always a doozy.
Based on that last sentence Frank just gave me, I think we just became best friends. So
I believe the last time I talked
can
to
agree
you,
to that
Brandon,
too.
I was trying to cram the green-white Kaguya so I could add a turn 3 combo kill to Wanderer, even though that's not particularly fast.
Yeah,
Ryan, I mean, Ryan, how many times have I even like reached out to you and been like, Ryan, what if we did this?
It's a constant back and forth. Yeah, for sure.
I think I remember quite a few conversations of just like Ryan coming to me and say, "So I'm thinking about this card," and I'm like, "Sounds weird," or "Sounds great."
Usually, like, I always lead with like a hypothetical. I'm like, all right, so this is really good right now, right? And it's like, yes, Ryan, it is. So if this is good, then that means that this thing is super good, right? And he's like, yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's like, all right, now here's where we go into the rabbit hole. And you always go like 3 steps deep for something obscure.
Yeah, and I think, as someone who is kind of watched teams evolve and form and shift and change, and as someone who's been on a team and is now not on a team, I think I can attest to the fact that yes, there are teams, and yes, there's competitiveness in Force of Will, but honestly, the friendly rivalry between teams in this game is probably like some of the most really friendly that I've seen in any game, which I'm pretty happy about, right? Because I think I can speak to, especially, Ryan and Brandon, you guys, your experience, I've kind of been an observer, right, as you guys have kind of moved through the scene. Even when you guys have changed teams or anything else, it's still really cool to see that you guys are still having fun and like no one's trying to like rip each other's head off.
Oh, sure.
So I think that's something that other games have a problem with. And so like as teams get formed in Force of Will, if I was afraid of that happening in like other games, it's like, oh no, another team, they're gonna step onto the scene and cause lots of drama. I just don't see that happening really here with our game, and so that's kind of a cool thing for me too in looking at teams.
Now, one of the cool things about this game is that most of us are all friends, right? Like, there's not any like real arch enemy of Force of Will or anything like you see in some other games. So we all get along.
Yeah, I feel like most of us just kind of like became friends through Grand Prix, and then like a select handful of us like went to Worlds and then became closer friends. And then like even though like when you're at Worlds, you're Team USA, like it doesn't matter what team you're on. So you come back from Worlds, you're in the Grand Prix, and you're like, oh, we were like chilling in Japan, having a blast with each other. Like we can't hate each other because we're on different teams. Like for the next year, like we're gonna have a great time, When
Japan comes around, like all team barriers drop. Like Team USA is so much more important than any other team.
Team straight, team gay, that goes out the window too.
Exactly. Except that we're all on team gay, so.
So kind of speaking to that kind of idea, right? That same kind of concept of like talking about the fun and not necessarily which of those two teams that you just mentioned you're on.
On Nano World,
Yeah, right. Those two. So Force of Will is a pretty unique game in the fact that it's still kind of, I would consider it still in its infancy, right? So with that and the fact that there are so many other card games out in the world, even in the United States and worldwide, whatever, what drew you guys to this game? Like, what drew you guys to this game? And then kind of the follow-up is like, what keeps you going in this game? What kind of keeps you invested? Because I know for me, like, they definitely got me hooked from the concept of like the Grimm fairy tales, hands down. Like just that aesthetic being in a card game. Like I didn't even know the mechanics of the game, and then someone was like, hey, yo, this card game's coming out and you can like have a ruler and it's Grimm. It's literally Grimm for the fairy tales. And I was like, well, I'm sold. I don't even know how to play. Let's do it. So it's kind of been like the aesthetic, and then the mechanics keep me around, I think, because I just really enjoy the flow of the game. But really just the theming is really what got me into the game. So I'm curious what that would be for you guys coming from your different backgrounds.
For me, I guess, what got me into the game and what keeps me in the game are actually very different. Because I only started playing card games about 4 years ago. And I just started going to a local shop and playing Friday Night Magic, just playing super casual. And the owner of the shop and one of the workers there were, Cody Jennings was getting into Force of Will, and he's like, Frank, you gotta try this. And he offered me a deal on a box, and so I think it was actually the first time I'd ever bought a box. Like, I hadn't even bought a box of Magic at that point. And so just bought a box, started playing. playing with them and having fun. Just like that was what got me into it. Was just like, oh, these are some people I know. They're playing, and they got me into it. And like he ended up getting in. Like pretty much everyone in Kansas City started playing Force of Will because of him. But what keeps me in it is sort of some like unique factors. Like obviously, like I honestly like my favorite part of Force of Will is just the combat phase. Like I love combat math. I love battlefield stuff. I think it's part of the reason why I like Sealed so much is that there's nowhere where you have to deal with making correct attacks and using the battlefield to your advantage as much as Sealed. And Force of Will lets you do that better than any other card game I've seen.
There you go. So can I tell a story about how I got into Force of Will? It's a little long-winded, but it's important to the prompt here. So back when I was in college, I played a lot of Magic. In fact, I played competitive Magic. Like I drove around to what was then called PTQs, played in Grand Prix, played very competitive Magic. And I had a girlfriend at the time who I had tried to teach Magic to several times, but she just kind of didn't really care, you know, and that was fine. There was no problem with that. But one day at my local store, they brought Force of Will in and advertised it to the Friday Night Magic players as this is easier Magic. This is Magic that's less complicated, which nowadays I don't actually think is true, but that's what they told me. So I bought it so that I could teach it to her, so I could use Force of Will as a stepping stone to get her into Magic. And then I bought Force of Will and I played it and I was like, this game is actually just fixed Magic. Like it fixes a lot of my problems with that game. And I think the art's better. I think it's just an overall a much neater game. And I'm a really spiky person. I like playing games competitively in general. So then I went online. I found a competitive deck list. The first one I found was Necrolance. This kind of tells you when I got into the format, about when Battle for Atarakia came out. And I went down to my local shop, and I met MacGyver March, who was the very first Force of Will player I ever met in my life. And that's the world that I come from. And I walked in, I had, I don't know, $500 or something on me, and I said, okay, I got $500, you got locals here, I want to buy the best deck in Force of Will, you know, what is it? And he was like, oh, we can make you this Necrolance deck for $80. And I was just blown away, because I came from Magic, right, where everything was so much more expensive. It was like, this game is easier Magic, it's fixed Magic, it's a cheaper Magic, why am I not just playing this? So then I bought into Force of Will, and then I've continued playing just because of basically everything I said. The game is a lot more fun. The community is a little smaller, so I feel like I know everyone. Yeah, that's why I'm still here.
Cool. So my long and tragic backstory is going through college, I was very, very good at League of Legends. I know I'm starting in a weird place, but we'll get there, don't worry. I was like Diamond 1, I was like on some amateur teams, I was like doing well, you know, playing in tournaments, but like I was like top 0.1% League of Legends, and to be like in the LCS, like the pro scene, you need to be like top 0.01%. So I never made it big. Eventually I stopped playing League and I got into this game called Dawngate, which is like it was a MOBA. It was the same genre of game as League of Legends, but it wasn't League of Legends. So it had a smaller player base, but they were trying to promote the game, so they had really large prize pools. So I ended up playing in that game. I was very good at it because it was the same game of League of Legends. And I played in their like world qualifier tournament. I got third place and won $1,000. Felt really good. And then the game died. And I was like, oh man, that felt really bad. But it was a lot of fun, like playing this small player based game and with a very, very tight knit community, and then doing well and getting paid for it. And I was like, that was really cool. That was really fun. So after the game died, I ended up switching to another like League of Legends ripoff called Infinite Crisis, which is like the DC Comics version of League of Legends. Played that, got really good at it, was actually #1 on like the ranked ladder at one point, and then the game died. And I'm like, man, well, I got to play in tournaments, got to win some money, it was a lot of fun. So I just like developed this habit of like looking for small player-based, tight-knit communities with like over-buffed prize pools, because like the game wants to promote itself, and just like being that top 1% player, doing well enough to like win tournaments, and then just like, you know, living out the game for as long as I could go. So I used to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Like competitively back in high school, so like eventually I couldn't find any more MOBAs to play, so I started like looking for card games, and my brother Aaron, who I don't think you guys know, he mentioned Force of Will, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. I'm like living in Louisiana at the time, like trying to save up money for a car, living with my dad, and there's like a Grand Prix in Texas in like 2 weeks, and I'm like, all right, well, this game looks pretty good. I guess I'm gonna learn it, gonna figure out what's going on. So I just like buy into the game online, learn the game, head to the GP Houston back in 2015, and I end up getting the salty 9th place. But like I absolutely fell in love with the game. Like it definitely took off as more than just like a cash grab where I'm like trying to just like win that paid trip to Japan. Like the resource system is just, like Brandon said, fixed magic, and that just felt so good to play. I felt like in control of all of the games, like whether I was winning or losing. And a lot of people hate Reflector Frame, but when that card came out, that was like I'm the master of my own destiny. Like every game of Force Will I play is decided by skill, and it just felt so good to play, and that's what really kept me around.
Yeah, excellent. So I enjoy the fact that everyone has these kind of very differing backstories and different things that kind of draw them into the game and keep them into the game, and I think that really speaks to what Force of Will has going for it, right? And we just need to hopefully that kind of continues as we go forward. Like I said, it definitely feels like we're still in infancy. I know that the game's been out for 3 years, but
we're toddlers.
4 year. Yeah, we're getting into like developmental stages where we're like, okay, well, we have to really start actually being held accountable for our decisions and knowing that we have some control over our world and we can actually make decisions without being afraid, but at the same time we gotta maybe not make stupid decisions anymore. But we can get into that on a different discussion. So one of the things that I think is a major topic that I would like to discuss tonight, having all of these very, very skilled players, I would consider you all to be very, very skilled, and having very good mindsets and differing mindsets about this game. We have had, for those of you who aren't maybe tracking GP results, we have had this kind of issue in the past 3 months with this ruler called Scheherazade, who says you start the game with 10 cards in your hand, essentially. But the main kind of question on everyone's minds with the new mindset of the company's attitude towards the ban list becomes, with what we've seen in the GPs, with what's kind of been seen as below Scheherazade, with what's been seen from Scheherazade and everything like that, what is going to come out of this ban list? What do we want to come out of this ban list? And what actually is going to come out of this ban list? Now, Ryan, I know you've spoken about this before in your daily, yes. So definitely go check out that discussion. So I think you can feel free to definitely chime in. But the ban list, right? So what's going on with that?
So are you asking kind of what we think is going to happen, or what we would want to happen? Or...
Yeah, sure, exactly. If in your opinion, what kind of needs to happen? What would you like to see happen?
So what I want to happen, I don't actually think is going to happen. I personally, if I was in charge of the whole world, would just kill Scheherazade. I think the ruler itself is...
I completely agree.
Comes from a position where she is too consistent. I think her fundamental design is very flawed. I think the dolls getting quick casting is fine, actually. So, if we wanted to make, a doll tribal ruler, that's whatever. But, especially with how they design the stories to each be this ridiculously specific counter, but you also have these stories that just grind infinite advantage. I don't think there's a way to hit Scheherazade where she is still fun and interesting, but not broken and oppressive. I think that her fundamental design forces her into one of those two roles, either too weak to function or unfun in the meta. So I think they should just hit her, but I highly doubt they're going to do that. They didn't hit Fox. I think they should have hit Fox too, for the record, but they didn't.
Hit Priscia, though. So,
Priscia, what card could they have possibly banned? They didn't at first, did they? They banned Levitine before they banned Priscia, and then
right.
Priscia was still insane, and so then they had to they were forced to ban Priscia. And
so same argument. Just if you can let me chime in here real quick.
Of course,
they banned Priscia because what other card do you ban? Well, okay, I think they should ban Scheherazade because what other card do you ban? What else do you ban besides Scheherazade that makes Scheherazade not oppressive?
I think the only way you can do it personally would just be it would have to be a really a type of banning that is really bad, and that I think you would have to essentially institute a ban that controls what can go in the story deck, and that's just awkward and clunky.
Right, that's just... That's what I was saying. Like, I think you could ban cards from Scheherazade in such a way that you just like made her atrociously unplayable. But I don't think that's the direction you want to go either, because I think like Ruin's Story, and this is the biggest one, is I think when a lot of people talk about banning for Scheherazade, they talk about banning Ruin's Story. But I think Ruin's Story is like actually just an interesting card. Like, I want Ruin's Story to exist for green-black control decks. I just don't want.
Yeah,
it
I
to
would agree. I would agree with that.
I just don't want it to exist for Scheherazade, and I've heard people talk about like, I'll ban Ruin Story as an extra deck card. I still don't think that's going to be good enough though, because I think if Scheherazade like gets it in her main deck, like that's just still probably a little bit too broken. So I think you just ban Scheherazade, and that just solves all your problems.
My soapbox spiel that I always go off with Scheherazade is like, we have a card that's like designed to counter Scheherazade. It's called Shackles of Ice, and like, if you do not go first in the game, like Scheherazade still has enough time to flip up 2 stories, and that like turns on the 11/11 doll and makes your 2-mana quick cast card a 7/7, and it's like super strong in a best case like specific sideboard card scenario. I think that's too powerful. So like, we've kind of seen that it's very difficult to print cards that actually stop Scheherazade. And then you actually have this, like, the go-to banning philosophy is ban Ava, ban Ruin Stories, like maybe ban another card on top of it. And that's just, it feels bad, because I do agree with what Bremont was saying, where like Ruin Stories is a super, super fun card that has like really cool options and is like fairly costed in green-black control decks. But when you put it in Scheherazade and have that 4th mode activator, even if it's not in the extra deck, just the fact that it flips down 2 stories like just makes it over the top. And I don't like Ruin Stories existing in Scheherazade, but I like Ruin Stories existing, so I really just want to see the ruler ban for like those 2 reasons.
Right. That's exactly what I think.
Yeah. And I'm so I come at it from a different perspective. From the, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, I am completely willing to accept that a ruler is a bannable card, right? Because I know that there are some philosophies that like no ruler should ever be banned. Like, it's like, well, we want to be able to play it, right? Because rulers are super important, and like, what happens if I pack it and I'm told I immediately can't use it, right? So I get that mentality, but I'm also not opposed to the banning of a ruler. Like, I think that Prissy was completely fine to be banned. I also can totally see the idea of Fox getting banned, like from the perspective of being able to use those tools in different rulers and different decks. I can definitely see Scheherazade being a bannable card. Coming from the perspective of, though, wanting to make it so a player who's just getting into the game opens a pack, pulls a ruler, being able to use it. I also still don't really know exactly what you would need to do, because I'm thinking, like Brandon kind of said, if you banned enough cards to really take her out, is she playable in any way outside of just like playing casually locals? And that's a question that I really haven't experimented with, so I don't really know if it's possible.
So
that's the biggest feels bad situation, right? Is if you do ban Scheherazade, like half the green cards in that set become actually like garbage.
Yeah, right. And that's the thing where I'm talking about, like, is this just a case of we accept that we are just going to perma-nerf a ruler to the point where they will never see competitive play but can still be used casually for tabletop players or kitchen table players or like locals, right? And so that's an interesting dilemma to come to, right? I think it also kind of speaks to this has kind of become a recurring concept, I think, for Force of Will 2, is that there's this very different mindset between play styles in terms of thinking about the game in like Europe and United States versus where the game is developed.
Yeah.
Because as someone who when Sherry was kind of first released, I played a Sherry's doll list not using Eva, right? It was like a doll control. And so like rather than using Eva, I was using the Marionette that like when it dies I draw a card, and I was sticking it around like Legend 2, Legend 3. Like that deck felt fun and fair but could be successful. Right? And that's on the channel. That's the list that's on the channel right now. But immediately, like, when you're trying to win GPs, right, I think at least in the United States, we don't necessarily think fair. we're kind of driven to kind of take every opportunity we can to try to make our deck as good as possible so that we get the invites, right? Which I don't think is a bad mindset to have, provided it keeps people in check of like not trying to cheat or anything like that. But I think that when we've had these rulers from the perspective of like Prisia, from the perspective of Fox, from the perspective of Scheherazade, it sometimes feels like those cards were not designed to be
and that's
taken to their absolute limit.
That's kind of what I was alluding to earlier when I said that I thought Scheherazade was just a poor fundamental design. Like, I think that it itself is just, it's written to be oppressive, like especially with the philosophy of all of the stories being either hard counter cards or the ability to loop your hard counter cards. Like I don't know. And I know saying that doesn't really accomplish much. Like that's not really a solutions oriented thought, but like going forward, I want to see Force of Will think more about like how does this design affect the overall game? Like, is this basic thought healthy for the game? Like, I don't know.
Or at least on mine, another thing I would like to see is I'd sort of like to see, and some of this just comes back to like, I guess, design and testing, but I feel like their current testing methods are all sort of looking in a certain direction, and so like Scheherazade was like, obviously like she's an overstep and has gone too far, but they've had multiple times where they've had like really powerful ones where it's like you can see that they were trying to like, oh, let's let the players do this cool fun thing, and they're just like they're all looking on just one axis.
Right. Yeah, I can agree with that.
As weird as this sounds, I almost feel like they need a distinct, like, and it's part of, I mean, I guess it's not a secret that I'm behind trying to do something like this, but I feel like they need a distinct for casuals format, just because it sort of introduces a route to where, like, not only, like, at the testing and when people are assessing things, they're like, oh, this were, like, in the Magic equivalent, there's, like, oh, these are, you'll hear people just say, like, oh, these are commander cards. And it's like, they're fun and people get to play with them, and then they don't really hit most of the competitive players' radar, but it gives you, like, a defined area where, like, oh, we need to make sure it works in this format, and because of that, they look at it like, okay, here's our casual one, here's our competitive one, and it gives them, like, defined things they sort of have to checklist to make sure they're looking at all of the avenues of play, and Force of Will sort of feels like they're designing almost entirely for that casual direction, and like missing it, and so occasionally they miss out on like, oh, when you try and play super competitive, this is uncontestedly better than the rest.
Yeah, I can think of
Prisia.
Like Prisia, or even in this case of like Resonators, right? So like the first card that comes to mind when you think about that idea of thinking on one axis for like, oh, let's give these players this cool tool, right? Is Rachel, the 3-drop Rachel. So hear me out, because I know that we're all saying, oh, it's an enter effect, it means it was designed for Lumia. I don't think that's exactly the way it was designed. Because Lumia, because I also think that Force of Will is, I mean, not every card game kind of does this, but like Force of Will is like weirdly unique, I think, in just how much the lore kind of does impact card design, right? And I can't speak to, because I haven't been in those other card games, like Magic, who's been around for forever, as much to that. But like Rachel, when I first saw Rachel and I looked at it, they were like, oh, this was clearly designed both in lore and in structure to be a card for Green Gill. Like, clearly designed to be that. Like, you stick it on board, it lets you look at the top 3, you find your elementals, you pitch them. If it's not an elemental, you keep it on top of your deck, and then when it dies, you can go kind of get one of Gill's like booster spells, right? Like,
you will get a spirit magic.
Right, a spirit magic. Like, clearly designed from the perspective of being just a really cool mid-range tool for Green Gill. However, the problem then becomes, again, thinking in that separate axis, kind of like Frank was saying, is it wasn't thought of from this second axis, and so therefore it was the card effect was written in such a way that it was completely and totally abusable by Lumia. And so, like, I kind of wish that just we could find a way to help or kind of fix or encourage really thinking on it along those multiple axes. Axes is the right word.
I think it's axes, but yeah.
Brandon, you were about to say something. I apologize for
I was just going to observe that I think that, yeah, that is definitely what they do, and that should definitely stop, because there's just no purpose. They stop publishing lore articles, so if that really is how they're approaching it, then, like, what are you really accomplishing?
So the lore articles are published still. They're just getting caught up because they didn't have a
Okay.
translator for the longest time.
Sure.
I would also point out that, like looking at it like the lore is just part of the articles is, like this comes from someone, I guess, who just, like, obsessively loves flavor, but, like the articles are almost just like a table of... They're almost just a table of contents to string together the flavor they've already put out there. Like, if you take the entire set and put it together, you can tell 90% of what's in those lower articles from the art and from the flavor text. Like I guess maybe I'm biased because I've only done Magic and Force Will, but it feels like all modern card games do that. And, like, so if you're really, like, looking into everything, you'll see all of that flavor and stuff.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm also just a sucker for the lore, so I try to read, like, every little piece of...
I'm the angry grandpa of the lore. Brandon can attest that, like, several times this week, several times every spoiler season, I'll come to him, like, people are doing this, and don't they realize this is going on? I think, like, this week was, the art came out for, spoiler art came out for, like, oh, it's 7 days till pre-release, and everyone's like, because it was a certain artist, they started guessing off characters. I'm like, no, none of these things fit.
You notice
and I
there's
ran
that,
into
like,
Brandon.
Yeah, there's that one art style that everyone always thinks is either Moojart or Cheshire Cat.
Or Valentina.
Or Valentina.
But, like, and so I'll get a good rant going at least once a spoiler season on something like that.
Tell it how it is, Frank.
Yeah, so I think
I did have to tell someone their favorite character died, though. That was fun.
Ooh, it does have to be this kind of weird... I don't necessarily know how it becomes injected, right, into how things get looked at or examined. But I just think that it's... If more checks... And maybe Jeff is already helping to do this more, right? Jeff Finnegan. I think hopefully can be kind of our, like, window into that route.
Well, so everything Jeff has said so far about what they're changing, I've liked. And then, but recently, especially over the last, like, month, when we've had a lot of the issues with this next set kind of come to light, Jeff has started to say more and more that he has, like, a little bit less power than we'd kind of hoped he originally had. But I really like Jeff's ideas. I really hope that Jeff sort of gets the reins in a much more tangible way.
I would agree with you, and I think I was talking with Brian. I think I was talking with you about this at Providence.
Possibly.
That, like, if R4 doesn't come out with, like, anything stupid, right? In the sense of, like,
so
like,
Atarakia has already been spoiled.
Okay, so that could be up for that. We could talk about that card at a different time. But, like, if R4 doesn't, like, create a new Prisia meta in the sense of, like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't necessarily say, oh, we're just not going to play cards from R2 and before because everyone's just going to play R4 cards.
Right.
Because it's that good. If that doesn't happen, and I think I don't know what the name of the new cluster is, but when we go back to Valhalla, right? So, like, if that happens and then this rotation is also smooth, so, like, 6 months, right? I think if we keep this trend that we're on, then, like, I'm really excited to see what the game state looks like at that moment. I think it kind of becomes this, like, super healthy position, especially, and I'll tack onto the fact, especially considering the fact that we know that with every set release, we're getting an updated ban list, even if nothing changes. Because I think from the beginning of the game, right, how long it took, Reflect Refrain, 18 months? What was it, like 12? Like, how long was... It took a really long time for us to even get our first ban list with Reflect Refrain. But even now, we know for a fact that every 3 months, card pools are being reevaluated. And, like, don't get me wrong, that creates a 3-month sprint of time where there's potentially more or less GPs where people can get really frustrated. Get it, 100%. But, like, we know for a fact that the card pools and the tournament reports are being looked at every 3 months with actual affecting, like, with the ability to actually make change when that 3-month stint happens. And so I think with that system in place, if R4 is really solid and the transition out of Lapis Cluster is really solid, I'm really excited to see what comes, like where this game could go.
So Jeff appeared on the TCG Scrubs podcast earlier, like when like the spoilers were out for this set and like everyone was still really, really worried about Rachel. And he talked a bit about like the upcoming philosophy on like set design and like how much power he had and like the balance and stuff like that. And one of the things that was like the most important thing that was brought up to me was he talked a little bit about design philosophy and how like one of his favorite cards is Seal of Wind and Light. And it's because it's got this like dual color restriction where it's obviously a powerful card, but like you're locked into green and white for, you know, being able to play this card. And then you also have like the modal option of being able to awaken for Moon, which is like a very difficult to access resource in some decks. Like, I mean, Moonstone's notwithstanding, right? Like if you only have Apollo, like you have this upgraded mode to the spell and it makes it even more powerful, but only in like certain situations and in certain decks. And like you're really investing heavily into this card to make it operate at full capacity. And they talked about how after we see R4 and once we get back to the Valhalla cluster, that decks start being designed more around, or cards start being designed more around that. And so I'm really looking forward to, I guess, V1 being the first point where we would see a resurgence in the game. And not to say that Seal is a balanced card. I think Seal is broken, but like I think that's very strongly facilitated by how strong green is. Like if Seal was a blue-white card, like that would be a very well-designed card, you know? If it was like, if blue was a counterspell thing and green wasn't the best card enforceable. So like I've been looking forward to the Valhalla cluster, which is what I'm like is coming up to be like where the game is able to make a turning point. And I'm really hoping that like the Scheherazade like road bump and the potential like Ataraxia / Feasting road bump that we have coming up aren't gonna like, you know, be too damning. Because I think if they do like even like put a bit more effort into marketing the game and they do actually have like improved game design, like I'm really, really excited for where we can go. But we are at like the low point of our, you know, our rebound right now, and it's tough to like keep players around. But like I think like next set is where we can pull the game back around if we can. So
if I can piggyback onto one of the things you mentioned, I do think one important thing that they need to do is on the marketing line. Mm-hmm. So because like I think like Brandon may have the most GP tops this year, but I'm fairly certain I'm the player who has been maybe short of Blandon, who's been to the most Grand Prix this year. And we're sort of at the point, like with the attendance, what's there is sort of like you've got a combination of like that area's locals, but then you have a lot of just the people who you see going to a fair number of GPs, like the regional grinders, so to speak. And like it feels like part of what we're missing is like new players coming into the game. Like we have this problem at like you hear this about locals too, where people's locals are really small. And how do we get like people coming back in? Like we need an initiative bringing new players in, and we need tied into that like an initiative to like convince them that going to GPs is something that's fun and worthwhile.
Yeah, I agree, and I think so.
It's hard to do that in the Scheherazade meta. I mean,
it is hard to do that for sure. I think that I'm trying to remember exactly if it was talked about. Mainly from the perspective of if it was talked about, then I can talk about it. But I seem to recall something being said about maybe one of AG's articles or something, talking about trying to completely reorganize the structure of competitive play, in terms of organized play seeing this kind of striation, right? So it's not just GPs.
I need to jump up my dictionary real quick. What is a striation?
Striation means that like it has multiple tiers, like it's kind of fleshed out to have multiple tiers.
So we have a pro circuit. Is that what I'm hearing? Because oh baby, that's all I've wanted.
So I mean, I think we kind of at this point GPs are kind of like that top level event, right? But I think that if we can kind of bridge, and don't get me wrong, ARG and the Circuit Series have also been kind of a boon to the communities that have been able to get those kind of things going, right? But I think if an official Force of Will organized play structure that exists not only at the GP level, but at the states level and at the locals level, right? That they're all connected together in some way, I think that helps to really do what Frank's talking about, where we make being part of the organized play, being part of going to Grand Prix, being part of going to states events, being part of the grind much more enjoyable for players. And I hope that happens. And I think I remember hearing something about that is a plan. I don't know exactly what that looks like. I would love to see a system in place similarly to what Italy does with their FOW system. Maybe we can get them to bring it over here. But I think that would go a long way, in addition to removing the Scheherazade meta.
If I can interject on that, like, I think it's something that we want long term, but like a structure like that is, I mean, it's the game version of a bureaucracy, and you need to have your bureaucracy sized relative to the population you're managing. So like, if you get like that tiered, but the game's like active population isn't big enough, you devalue all of the tiers. Like,
right.
And so, like, well, I think that's something important. I think it's a later step, I guess.
Yeah, that's fair.
But like, so I guess going on my own history, like, because this was my first card game, so like, I first started going to Grand Prix because we had a locals group that would go to them, and like some of the players were, I mean, like, we were not all at the same skill level, so like my first Grand Prix was Texas, and I barely made top 64, but like it still felt fun. I still had a good time going with everyone. There was still like value in the Grand Prix for me, even if I wasn't anywhere close to being top 8 or something, like something you can brag about. And like, there is a phase everyone's going to go through where they're just not going to be, like, they're going to have events like that, and you have to go a few times before, like, you have to play competitively a certain amount before you've gotten the experience and, like, you've figured out how to, like, do well and work your way up. And the key missing part, I feel like, right now is just, like, when someone goes, there's nothing to draw them back. Like good or bad meta aside, like, even when it was, like, balanced, like, we need to make sure that people feel like they got a good experience out of going to the GP, even if they didn't perform well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we can get back to that. But I agree that it needs to be something where if you scrub out or if it just doesn't go well, you still walk away from the event going, yeah, that was fun. That was worth my time. I'd do that again.
Can I just like chime in here real quick? Are you talking about like top 32, top 64 promos, that kind of stuff? Or do you just want like individual regions to have more Grand Prix? So like if you go to a Grand Prix and you only, you don't do very well, but you can say, man, like that wasn't my best day, but I can come back in 3, 4 or 5 months, and like there's gonna be another Grand Prix that's like a couple hours away that I can like try again and like use what I've learned. Like, what kind of things are you looking for in that kind of topic?
I think that's about half of it, and the other half is just, and like the other half is something that like is being worked on some this season, but it's like making it to where your day one is not all of the Grand Prix, like having like, like, oh, you take part in the Revenge Day 2 events where like
I live for those.
Revenge Day 2 events. I've never
like one of my favorite Grand Prix was one where like I got close, but like bombed out in the last couple rounds. Then went back day 2, played in like it was Collinsville where we had the first 1K, and like so like we had enough draw that day 2 I got to play in like a 60-person event. Got to do another 6 rounds, and like. Got to, like, in my case, it was like, okay, well, we've done my best attempt. Time to bring the fun deck that I don't think had a chance at the Grand Prix, but like I just want to try it out and like throw it to the fire, and like that was still one of my favorite Grand Prix.
Yeah, I could agree wholeheartedly with that. I think from my Grand Prix experience, it's always just the ones that I had the most fun at, even though if I wasn't very successful, were just ones where, I don't know, there was a lot of community interaction, or just like my time even outside of my games in the main kind of Grand Prix event, whether that be playing casual games with friends or participating in side events, was just like enjoyable. And I think that we're getting back towards that, but now it's kind of this matter of like, we have to establish that, then we have to bring players back in so that they can take advantage of that establishment. And it's a little bit of like the chicken and the egg kind of situation, but we'll see what kind of comes out of that as we move forward. So I hate to kind of cut off, but I think I would like to try to, as this is kind of a fresh idea, this podcast, right? I think much like as teachers would kind of vent to each other or just kind of talk about things that maybe wouldn't be appropriate for their students to hear in the teacher's lounge, is
oh boy,
to just kind of a fun topic at the end of each one for just kind of us to just kind of have our brains go numb for a bit as we end the night. And so for today, a very common topic, it's brought up frequently in many like teen chats or on the things, is who is the cutest boy in Force of Will?
All right, so we have to first ask: are we counting all Force of Will players or just U.S. boys? Because unfortunately, the Europeans do have us beat in this one exclusive regard.
Wait, is the answer not Milliam? I thought we were talking about characters.
Sorry.
No.
Yeah, I think we're trying to go characters first, but then we can kind of dig a little bit deeper for you.
No. This was completely supposed to be Bremont's obsession with the cutest boys in Europe. I mean, Force of Will. Sorry. But yeah.
So I mean, this could even just be the simple case of like, I guess who is your favorite male character in the game, or if we want to go down the rabbit hole that is Brandan ranting, we can have him just kind of go off and tell us.
So you guys have seen like evil
European
genie's abs, right? Like the abs on this genie are like ridiculous.
I honestly, I do not look at card art very much. Like, I see a card and my eyes just go right to the text, and I just, start brainstorming what I can do with that card.
Ryan, go find an evil genie near you and look at, and just, actually, I'll find the card image and post it.
Oh, no, there's a deck box right here. I'm sure it's got a Scheherazade deck in it. Hold up. Yo, you weren't kidding. Holy moly. What the heck?
What? Yes, whatever. They're useless. Evil Genie does not have enough body fat. I want this out there. That's a useless level. That's a useless level of fit. Like that's a genie that's gonna starve as soon as he runs out of food. Like 2 days tops. The abs are gone, and so is he.
You need to have these kinds of abs if you're gonna generate the value that this card generates. Those are value generating abs.
BS. Look how little value they can hold. Can't store value in muscle.
Man, Frank, I don't know about your abs, but I don't think your abs make the opponent discard a card, lose 400 life, and sacrifice a resonator.
Oh, goodness. We're going down a rabbit hole that I was not expecting, but that's okay.
You asked for this.
I did ask for this, and I am okay with it. I support this decision.
Why you gotta do this?
If we have to go with name characters, I guess like Kirik Rurik if you're into Scalies, but I guess that's a really specific...
That's a specific topic.
Specific niche.
Is Scalies a term? I don't want to ask that question.
So it's like furries, except instead of like mammals, it's reptiles. Scalies.
My favorite Scaly is Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, what?
I think my favorite, at least recently, I think my favorite male character has really been like Gil/Gil Lapis. The new Gil Lapis is just so gosh darn adorable. I just want to like.
So people that know flavor, like, what is the relationship between Gil Al-Hamid, and Gil Lapis? Like,
I can give you that. So this is because this will be my teaching for the day, right?
Oh boy.
So essentially, the storyline is Gil is this kind of being that existed in the past, and then there was some kind of event that kind of correlated with him meeting Welser and going to go see Lorite, where his kind of path divided into some kind of moment. And one of these moments leads him to use the celestial mages, the people who are like of the stars, use the spirit magics.
The luminaries?
The luminaries, right, to turn on Lorite and follow him to Adaraktia, and then he kind of like goes evil, and then Lapis is somehow born from that and tries to rebel against his father to try to kind of like take over the world for himself, kind of get corrupted in the same vein of like thirst for power like his dad.
Okay.
So that's Gil into Al-Hamid, right? But that storyline becomes shifted when Rhea travels back in time from the future to try to interfere with the event. So Welser's influence on the initial kind of struggle with Welser for Gil, because Rhea is then a part of it, changes his story, and he no longer gets like corrupted. So the fact that he just stays Gil, and Rhea takes Gil away from everything so that he can't get corrupted, takes him away from Adaraktia, all that stuff. At which point in time they apparently have a kid, and they have Gil Lapis, who in this version, when raised under non-corrupted Gil and Rhea, kind of becomes this cheery, starry-eyed boy who wants to save the world. and keep it safe.
So for the ruler school, you're like the librarian then, huh? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, pretty much.
No, doesn't that make him the school counselor?
Oh, there we go.
He's in on all the dirt. You probably shouldn't have disclosed that, sir.
There's no confidentiality statements in ruler school.
All right.
Interesting.
So
the important topic.
on my favorite male character, we're gonna have to go with my second favorite because they spoiled my favorite into being one of my favorite female characters. So since Glorious is out, I'm probably gonna have to go with like Welser. In all honesty, like
He likes the old ones. The grandpas.
Glorious was my favorite flavor. What?
What?
But like, Glorious was my favorite instance of like the awesome knight character in this game. And just like, I guess prior to that would have been Arthur, maybe the 12-drop one, or the undead awesome-looking one. But like, I did not prepare for this. I was too much in the waifu game to think about this.
All right, Frank, share with us your favorite waifu.
Whoa, I gotta say my favorite boy.
Sorry, my bad.
Are we doing waifus too? Okay,
no, we'll do that. That's a whole nother day.
No waifus. It's too basic.
Cutest boy is obviously Blazer. Come on, guys. This man is a thief, a chivalrous thief recently, and he's got the most dashing hair.
He's a dragon.
Vice leader of the chivalrous thieves, Blazer, has the most dashing hair. Legendary thief, dragon, clown, one of my favorite rulers. You know, he does it all, man. Get you a man who can do what Blazer does.
Fair enough.
But on to the real topic. You know what we're talking about. The actual cutest forcible boys.
That actually will have to be a discussion for a different day because at
no,
this point
I didn't
in
want
time.
to sidetrack it that much.
Come on.
Okay, fine. Brandon, go ahead.
Honorable mention, Machina.
What? Okay, I don't know.
The dapper
yeah, it's the top hat, the mechanical top hat.
But no, we're talking the.
Don't derail the important
resonator.
Conversation, Frank. We got 3 minutes.
Don't derail the important conversation.
I missed. What was the important conversation? I was looking at dudes.
There is no important conversation.
Are we putting Europeans in their own separate category?
I think you could just do overall. So,
okay, so like
Brandon, what you
Benjamin
got
Bargetzki is like clearly the cutest.
one.
Like not even close. If you like include everyone in the world. Chris Hartel is also really close.
You stole. Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Those are just objective. There's no discussion there. I
have
think
a weakness for the Germans in general, just because like I
all right,
learned
so
German,
I'll
I can,
raise
like,
you
pretend
one.
to speak German.
If you
then,
like, so Benjamin
boys, man,
Bargetzki
you
like
do.
does it all, right? Benjamin is just every side of the spectrum. Chris, you got more of like the bigger kind of like protective guy, and if you want the other end of that, you got David Hartley as like also pretty high tier. It's like a pretty
he's
cute
like
one.
Cute, but
Right, exactly. So like, it's what you're
David
into.
Hartley as a girl because his sister looks like him, and,
Of course,
and it's just like, actually no, I don't know.
It's it's whatever you're into.
I will admit that this is not a topic that I have thoroughly investigated, so I will abstain.
Out, really.
I will abstain because literally none of these thoughts have ever crossed my mind.
How do you know yourself if you don't know
exactly
how you would feel if you were gay?
I will be honest.
I will point to the fact that I am married for 6 years with 2 children. That will be my defense.
That's a
100% have no concept of what makes a male cute or attractive or anything.
But like, you put Welser as your like definitive number one. How does that?
Right.
How does
you were
that
pretty
happen?
confident when you said that. I heard a lot of confidence
awesome?
in your voice.
Because he was awesome.
I had to like look up like boy forcible characters like as you guys were taking your turns to find my favorite like cutest forcible card.
Okay.
And then we get
here's
to
a
actual
hint.
boys, and you're like, yeah, I don't know, man. I just
Here's
play
a hint.
card
I started with my favorite knight looking dude. That is not at all about their actual looks. That was about how they're acting and appearing.
That's fair.
Like, I'm
It's okay.
useless on this front.
It's okay. We can all contribute in our own unique ways. But it's time for us to get back to teaching our students. And so for that, I have to say it is time for us to end this hangout in the Teacher's Lounge. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. And again, thank you to our guests, Ryan Miles.
Woohoo!
Brandan Bremont.
Hey.
And Frank Closser.
Bye.
For joining me through this unique romp through Force of Will and its many topics. So until next week, this is all of us signing off.